You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Hello, citizens of the Milky Way. This is the Creep Street Podcast. My name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Maureen Bogey.
Welcome, everybody. Real quick, as always, just want to say, follow us on Twitter at Creep Street Pod, on Instagram and Facebook at Creep Street Podcast. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please, please, please give us 5 stars. Leave us a review. You would not believe how much just taking that split second to just hit 5 stars, how much it helps us out.
Slap us with that 5.
It is huge. But if you're listening on Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever, just keep doing what you're doing. What's important is that you're listening, and because like we said, we want to build this community from the ground up, and we need all of you to do it.
It's true.
All right, let's get started.
Oh my God. Okay, pumped for this one.
Me too.
This story is not even really, story isn't even the right word.
Yeah.
Because this for sure happened. This is a true story.
Yep.
Matter of public record. This all really happened. Spooky, scary, cuckoo, crazy, honey.
Yeah, and I don't really know how many people. I know it got some news coverage here.
Right.
I'm guessing our friends on the other side of the ocean probably don't know much about it at all.
Right.
But I don't even know how many people in the States would know about this.
I don't really know because I was somewhat familiar with this. Like I kind of remembered hearing about it, that this happened, but I didn't know what it was. So we've been building it up.
We have. Mo, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the Watcher House.
Ooh.
Or the New Jersey Watcher. Whatever, floats your boat. This story is wild. I just want to say, before we get started, this could happen to anyone. These people are very normal, run-of-the-mill peeps. So just remember that.
Could happen to anybody.
This could happen to anyone. So, Derek and Maria Broaddus, they are a great couple. They got 3 young kids, ages 10, 8, and 5.
Right.
We probably could figure out their names if we really tried hard.
Right.
But they don't want their kids' names to be released, so let's
honor that. That's I think a very noble thing.
Because I think it's so disgusting when people whatever. It doesn't.
Right.
Whatever.
It's already shitty enough this family had to go through this. Yeah.
So we're not, popping off into that. Okay, so the Broaddus family. In June of 2014, family bought a beautiful house in Westfield, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Beautiful $1.3 million house, 6-bedroom house, Dutch colonial. I mean, amazing. It was built in 1905, but it still has all of the modern amenities that you would like in a house. Maria Broaddus, the mother of the family, she grew up in this town in New Jersey, so it was like a dream for her to be able to bring her kids back and grow up in this great town. Whereas Derek Broaddus, the father of the family, he grew up in a more working class family in Maine, so this was such a big deal for him too. He had worked his way up and able to afford this amazing house. He was probably still is, I'm sure, a senior VP of a Manhattan insurance company or firm. So he worked there. It was in, like I said, in Manhattan, Westfield, New Jersey.
So they probably live pretty comfortably. We can assume.
Clearly. I mean, obvious, especially because it's a nice house.
Right.
But it was perfect too because Westfield is a suburb of New York City, so he could still go into work every day, but this kid still had, the yard and the suburban life.
Right.
So they bought this house. So on June 5th, Derek Broaddus is over at their new house. They haven't actually moved into the house yet. The sale has closed. The previous owners have moved out, but just the Broadduses haven't moved in yet. But he went over there just checking some things out. I think he might have even been doing some painting inside or something. And it was 10 p.m. And just kind of out of habit, he checked the mail. And of course, there wasn't really much in there, just some bills or whatever. But then there was another thing in there, a big envelope that just said, "To the new owners" on it. It was sent to them through the mail, so it did have their address and everything on it, but it didn't have their name. It just said, "To the new owner." He didn't think much of it, opened the letter, but this is what the letter said.
Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within? 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched it in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. I see already that you've flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy. You have children. I've seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I've counted. More on the way. Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them, and I will draw them to me. Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I'm in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I'm in one. Look out at any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Welcome, my friends. Welcome. Let the party begin. Signed, The Watcher.
I mean, can you imagine?
First of all, let's just throw some props at whoever narrated that letter.
I mean, like a gorgeous
Wow, a world-class talent.
voice.
Just buttery smooth.
I don't know where you found him.
But seriously, fuck the Watcher.
Oh my god, this is horrifying.
Fuck this person.
Could you imagine you move into your dream house and then you open this fucking letter? Oh my god. So Derek Broaddus immediately had the same reaction we did. You know, what the fuck is going on? So he immediately goes inside, turns off all of the lights, and calls the police. Because he's like, what the fuck is this? The police comes over, and the police officer that's there, he even said, Derek Broaddus said, what the fuck is this? Because the police is like, this is so insane. This is a, suburban police department. They don't deal with shit like this. Like, this is bizarre.
Exactly.
So the police officer he's kind of like, doesn't have much to really go on, but all he says at the time, he's like, okay, don't tell any of your neighbors about this. Don't tell anyone about this, because everyone that's around you is a suspect.
Oh boy.
Any of your new neighbors could be the Watcher. Like, that's horrifying. So they immediately are like, okay. That's just so scary to think that anyone near you could be this person.
Right.
Like, what a way to just be super paranoid all the time.
Absolutely horrible.
So at first they are like, okay, we should ask the previous owners about this. Then the previous owners, their names were John and Andrea Woods. They also had kids, but their kids were grown. John and Andrea Woods were in their 60s, and they were just ready to downsize,
right?
Which is why they moved out. So Derek and Maria Broaddus send a email to John and Andrea Woods telling them about this letter and asking, like, does this ring any bells to you? Did this ever happen to you? And John and Andrea Woods said, no, this is very odd. We didn't receive anything like this, except about a month before they moved out, they got a letter kind of using somewhat similar language. I think they mentioned wanting young blood in the house and, all of these kinds of things. But John and Andrea Woods just thought it was strange, but they didn't really think anything of it. They just, got rid of the letter, whatever. But they did say, yeah, we did get that letter. That's very weird. So Derek and Maria Broaddus just still kind of trying to go about their lives with this, not trying to tell the neighbors, but they still need to come by the house to, put things together. They were doing some renovations at the house.
Right. So they still have not moved in.
They have not moved in yet.
Okay.
And they had not moved in yet just because they weren't planning on moving in yet. Nothing had changed. No plans had changed. But a neighbor had come up to them and they were chatting and they wanted a tour of the house. They gave them a tour of the house. And this woman said, oh, it'll be so nice to get some young blood in the neighborhood. Immediately, Derek's ears perk up. He's like, what the fuck is this? He can't ask her about it. He can't just confront her, but it perks his ears up. And it's kind of one of those things where, like, it's not super weird. It could just be a coincidence.
Because it is a phrase people use. I mean, it's
like, it's definitely could be a coincidence, but it's just weird.
Absolutely. Well, if you're already on guard, you're going to hear that then everywhere.
Exactly. So it's very bizarre. So a few weeks go by, and then another letter arrives.
Welcome again to your new home at 657 Boulevard. The workers have been busy, and I've been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time they will. I am pleased to know your names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often. 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic? Or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the Watcher. And I have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now, you are too, Brothers family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I'll be watching. First of all, buttery smooth delivery once again.
I mean, that whoever this guy is sounds like he knows how to treat a lady.
Clearly a handsome son of a bitch. Not to mention talented.
For sure.
But for real, fuck this Watcher.
Oh my god. This is horrifying. Terrible. And also in the letter, he referred to the children by their nicknames.
Oh, Jesus.
And listed them in birth orders.
Okay.
So this guy really knows. He wasn't just like, kind of had walked by a few times and was able to glean that there were 3 kids. He knew not just their names, he knew their nicknames, the order in which they were born, which is insane. And then also, the daughter of the family, one time she was there with the parents, because the parents at this point, Maria and Derek, before this second letter came, they were very cautious about bringing their kids there. They wouldn't if they could avoid it, but sometimes, you know, both of them had to be there and it was the daytime and all that stuff, so they would bring their kids there, and like the kids would be playing around in the backyard doing all sorts of that stuff, and you know, whenever the kids were just in a faraway corner of their backyard, still on their property, Maria was yelling after them, telling them to get closer and closer and closer, and Maria was like, oh my god, I was saying this, I was saying their names, I was saying their nicknames. So that the Watcher was nearby and heard me say it. That's how this Watcher figured it out. And also in the letter, it mentioned that the daughter of the family was painting on a toy easel in their enclosed porch in the back of their house. And he said, is she the artist of the family?
Okay, you know, that stuff, you almost hope that it is paranormal. Because if that's a person of flesh and blood doing that, I hope Derek Broaddus finds this Watcher and kicks the shit
out
of
God.
him.
It's insane. I mean, like, absolutely wild. Like, anytime kids are involved, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
where it's
absolutely.
Like, the fact that this person is watching their children is so disturbing.
Either they are insane.
Right.
Or they're the biggest dickhead.
Right.
Or, I mean, it could be a combination of both.
Sure.
But it's like, if this is just some dickhead who doesn't want them to move in.
Right. In that enclosed-in porch in the back, you cannot see it from the street. So if someone was driving by, they couldn't have just seen it, like the way that.
So they would have had. Oh,
they
God.
had to have been. It had to have been a neighbor. You know what I mean? Someone that could see into their backyard. Like it couldn't have just been someone driving by that just happened to see a little girl painting and was like, "Oh hell yeah, I'm gonna like scare them about this." It's someone close by, which is horrifying. After this, the Broadduses were like, honey, no, we're not bringing our kids over here anymore.
Surely not.
So they didn't, and the Watcher did not like that, and the Watcher sent another letter.
He sent a third letter.
He did.
Where have you gone to? 657 Boulevard is missing you. The house is crying from all of the pain it's going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. It cries for the past and what used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard, when I ran from room to room imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. And then it got old. And so did my father. But he kept watching until the day he died. And now, I watch. And I wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again. 657 Boulevard is turning on me. It is coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend, and now it is my enemy. I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again like I once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone. Okay, this sounds like a douchebag.
But I gotta say, what a fuckable voice.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, give this man a job.
You nailed it. That was no notes.
No notes.
You just killed it. But this guy, the Watcher, is clearly like having some issues with consistency. Does he want them to move in? Does he not want them to move in? This guy that sounds very kind of like manic and
it sounds like
erratic.
It sounds like it's just so like high school.
Right.
It sounds so fucking high school. It sounds like a letter like a kid in a long trench coat would write in the back of the classroom.
Sure.
You know, it sounds so child. It sounds so juvenile, which doesn't mean that this person's necessarily young, but it feels very juvenile.
No, it really does. And also, it's just not very clear on what it's saying and what it wants. And it's like threatening this family about if they move in, their kids are going to scream. Not just scream, like he never said exactly what would happen to the kids, but it seems very ominous. But then when they're not moving in, the Watcher's like, why aren't you here?
And that's the thing. Obviously, the first letter, especially, there was a threatening overtone. In this, the Watcher almost sounds afraid of the house. It's almost like he's pleading to the Broaddus family for their help.
Right.
That's what's so bizarre. The Watcher, this person sounds like this. There's a hint. There's a bouquet of desperation.
Yes.
That I'm smelling here.
Oh, okay.
At first, it's like, oh, you're moving into my house, but then it turns into please. Like it's such a weird. The signals are mixed.
Exactly. Very odd. And at this point, the Broadduses, their previous home, they had to move out of that home. And they're like, okay, well, we're not going to move into this house.
Oh, because not because of anything weird, just because they had sold it.
Their previous home had sold. And so they had to move in with Maria's parents, which, you know, I'm sure they're great. Not trying to put them
nothing
down.
wrong, but it's like...
This is like a full-ass family. They got 3 kids and 2 adults. That's like a lot to be moving into another house. And they just spent all this money on a house.
And I mean, my God, you think about it, like from, like you said, Derek's perspective, he came from a working class family.
Right.
You know, he's worked his way up the ladder. Now he's moved into a nice neighborhood. He bought a nice house for his wife and kids, and now he's got to move in with his in-laws because some dickhead thought they'd go on a creative writing spell. It's like, yeah, I'm sure it's even though I'm sure the in-laws are lovely people, it's like such a slap in the face.
For sure.
Yeah, of course. It would be infuriating.
Yeah, it really is. And there were just so many things that also made it strange. The Woodses, the family that had lived there before the Broadduses bought the house, they never even put a for sale sign in their yard. The sale of the house was never made public.
Of their old house.
Of 657 Boulevard.
Oh, 650. Oh, so even, oh God. So people shouldn't even, unless they're like direct neighbors, probably wouldn't even know about it.
That's another thing.
They would have had to have known the Woods personally, and the Woods would say, oh yeah, we sold the house.
Right, exactly. And also...
Why was it not listed?
I think it just sold fast.
Does that just happen sometimes?
Yeah, that happens.
Oh, okay.
And also the postmark date from the first letter was on June 4th. Which was also, once again, before the sale was public. Like, the Broadduses hadn't even moved in. So this person, that's just another way of showing, like, this person had to have been, like, in the know about this shit. And the letter was postmarked out of Kearney, New Jersey, or Kearney, I think it's Kearney, New Jersey, the USPS distribution center there, which is in northern Jersey. So this person clearly nearby, putting this in the mail nearby. They could have driven to Massachusetts or driven to New York City or wherever to put this letter in, and they didn't. They did it in New Jersey, in the area where they live. So, like, even more so, this person is close by and isn't really hiding the fact that they are close. So a little later, John Schmidt, who was another neighbor living on the street, he didn't live next to them, to 657 Boulevard. He lived 2 doors down. And he was talking with Derek Broaddus one day when Derek was there, just kind of chatting, whatever. And he mentioned that the next door neighbor to the Broaddus family, the house in between John Schmidt and the Broadduses, that was the Langford family.
Okay.
And he said they were kind of weird, kind of bizarre. That kind of got Derek's interest, and he found out that the matriarch of the family, the Langford family, who lived next door, her name was Peggy Langford, and she was in her 90s. And she had at least a few of her kids, maybe all of her kids, living with her grown children. They were in their 60s. Which in itself isn't damning or anything like that, but it's just kind of weird. And it didn't seem like they had moved in there to take care of her. It seems like they had never left, or they didn't need all of them to move in to take care of her, things like that. Once again, this doesn't mean anything. Just kind of odd. And the son of the family, his name is Michael Langford. He was also, in his 60s, and he, especially everyone in the neighborhood, thought he was kind of a weird guy. He had a long white beard. He didn't really seem to have a job of any kind, or at least he didn't go anywhere in the morning.
Well, and I'm assuming if you're in this situation, if you're the Broaddus family, you're probably looking at everyone
you're looking
sideways.
for anything. Yeah.
You're looking at all of a sudden that quirky neighbor, that quirkiness, even if they're completely innocent, suddenly that quirkiness comes off as like bizarre behavior. So it's like they say, it's like when you're listening to EVPs, to ghost voices, and before they tell you what they think it's saying, you'll listen to it and you'll hear like, and then they'll be like, I think it's saying leave the house, and then you re-listen to it and it sounds like leave the house.
Right.
It's kind of like that. It's like once you're in this shit situation, everyone that passes you, you're going to notice every little thing that seems a little off.
Exactly. And that's actually a thing that Maria Broaddus said that she would do, like if anyone gave her, when she was at the grocery store or whatever, because at this time, when they were staying with the in-laws, staying with Maria's parents, they were in Westfield, New Jersey. They lived in that same town. Even though they weren't living in their new house, 657 Boulevard, they were in the area, surrounded by these people all the time. Anytime she was in the grocery store, she said if anyone gave her a weird glance or seemed kind of weird, she would try to Google them and figure everything out that she could, because she was just so paranoid.
Well, and now that their story has made the news...
Well, it hasn't yet.
Oh, the story has not made the news yet. Okay, my bad.
No, that's fine. So yeah, he finds out about the Langford family and Michael Langford in particular. Everyone in the town, I guess, kind of described him as like the Boo Radley of the neighborhood. Like, weird, but harmless. No one
Right.
was really worried about him or anything like that. But Derek was like, I'm not so sure. So he told the police about this. He was like, hey, I found out about my next door neighbor, blah, blah, blah. And the police was like, we already brought him in for questioning, and we're not that's not him, but you're not going to be getting any more letters.
Okay.
Like, what does that mean?
What does that mean? So, first of all, how old is this?
He's in his 60s.
He's in, okay, this is what, okay, if someone told me that, if a policeman told me that, well, it wasn't him, but don't worry, you won't be getting any more emails. I'd be like, well, what?
Or letters.
Or letters, not emails. I'd be like, what the fuck do you mean it's not him, but you can tell me for certain I won't
Right.
be getting any more letters? If it wasn't him, who was it?
Exactly.
It's not like this is some 15-year-old kid causing some trouble in the neighborhood and, the police had a stern talking to him. And
right.
we're talking about a 60-year-old goddamn man.
Right. Who is, capable of doing who knows what.
Right. Not that a 15-year-old can't either. It's just
right,
we're not talking about just slapping a kid on the wrist and sending them on their way. We're talking about a 60-year-old fucking man
Sure.
who should know better.
Right. And that's something. And then the police, they said, you're not going to get any more letters. And they said, too, like, we don't think whoever is sending these letters is actually going to do anything. They're probably not going to do anything. And Derek has been quoted as saying, probably nothing's going to happen. Probably isn't good enough for me. This person attacked my family. And where I'm from, if you do that, you get your ass beat. So pop off, Derek.
Dad, whoop that ass, Dad.
Yeah.
Whoop that ass.
Yeah, I totally understand why he's like, no, that's not good enough for me. So the Broadduses, they're like, okay, let's send a letter to the Langford family that we are going to tear the house down. They weren't planning on doing that, but they kind of wanted to just egg them on to see what they would do, because clearly the Watcher has a huge affinity for the house. Nothing happened, though. They sent this letter. They didn't really hear anything. No freakouts, nothing. So they're like, that's kind of odd. Also, Abby Langford, Michael's sister, was also brought up because she was, I'm going to come right out now and say, I think this is a stretch, but some people think that she's a viable suspect. She was a real estate agent, and some people thought, okay, you know what, maybe Abby was pissed that the Woodses, the previous owners of 657 Boulevard, did not ask Abby to be their realtor because that was a really big listing, or she would get a really big commission off of it. And she was so upset about it that she was like, oh, I should scare the current owners out of this, so then they will just want to quickly sell it. Just give me the listing, and then I can get the money for this listing.
That seems like a stretch.
That seems like a lot of work to...
I mean,
you know what I mean?
I certainly don't know the ins and outs of domestic real estate, but first of all, you've got to, if that was the plan, you've got to hope it works out that way. Like,
right.
That just seems, like, you're right. That just seems like a lot of work for a very specific conclusion that might not happen.
And it's like, it's not like this was the only extravagant, beautiful house in the neighborhood.
Exactly.
Extravagant's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's not the only, so they're able to do DNA testing on the letter. And they found out that the DNA testing said that the DNA on the letter was from a female. So in the police's mind, they thought, okay, that cleared Michael Langford. And also they found that there were a couple of convicted child sexual predators that lived not far away, but they were both male. So they thought, okay, so it couldn't be them either. Which I think is kind of odd, because you could just ask anyone to lick the envelope for you. You don't have to lick the envelope yourself.
Yeah, that's another thing. I'm neither one of us are forensic scientists. I don't know how that shit works, but yeah, you'd think.
I don't really understand why that's like so conclusive. Evident, but whatever. That's what
you think how many people handled that letter in the mail. I'm assuming maybe they checked the lick. They're looking for whoever licked the envelope.
Right. They were. Yeah. So but still, who I don't know exactly.
Who knows?
It just doesn't seem like that's enough to take someone off of your
Once again,
list.
This sounds like a case of you're in a shitty situation, so suddenly everyone looks suspicious.
Exactly. So the Broadduses hired a private investigator, and the private investigator was able to get a bottle that Abby Langford, the next door neighbor who was the real estate agent, got a water bottle that she had drank out of, which is wild. I can't believe they did that. I don't know how they even got that, but they did, and it did not match the DNA from the letter.
Okay.
So that's another thing. Once again, that doesn't necessarily mean it for sure wasn't her, but it's another sign to say it's not. But Derek never really let go of this gut feeling that the Langfords were involved. So one day there was a painter named Bill working on the Broaddus' house, doing some, I don't know if it was interior or exterior, but doing some painting. And he noticed that the neighbors living directly behind the Broadduses, they were sitting, it was another couple in their 60s. They were sitting on lawn chairs really, really close to the fence, the shared fence with the Broaddus' house. And they were sitting on lawn chairs facing the Broadduses. They weren't facing their own house, and they weren't just off of their back door. So that was very odd.
Yeah.
And the painter Bill thought to tell the Broadduses about it. And he said that Maria Broaddus, when he mentioned it to her, like, collapsed in his arms. She was so stressed out and worried and scared about this. It was really, really...
That the neighbors were watching?
Not just about the whole situation in general.
Right, I'm sure. Well, it's stressful. And it's like, and who knows? These people could be entirely innocent.
Right.
When you're in a neighborhood and for the most part everything's chummy, it's not uncommon that neighbors will sit up, and if they see you, they'll be like, hey, neighbor, and they'll watch if you're, doing something in your backyard, you're building something, that's how neighbors are. They'll sit and they'll watch and just, but I could see in this situation how suddenly that simple neighborly gesture would maybe look a lot more ominous.
And I don't think you're totally right. It could have been that for sure. But I kind of got the feeling it wasn't so much as just like them being neighborly and sitting close by. It was more so like they were sitting oddly, like there's no real reason for them to be sitting
like they were
that close.
Exclusively sitting there to look into the yard.
Right. And like the Broadduses weren't there. It was a painter was just there. You know what I mean? So like, once again, this isn't enough to say it's definitely them, but it's just kind of weird. So in addition to hiring a private investigator, the Broadduses also hired 2 retired FBI agents to work on this. Yeah, they are not fucking around here. And actually, fun fact, one of the FBI agents that they hired was the agent that inspired the character of Clarice in Silence of the Lambs.
Wow, okay.
So not, bad or anything. So
yeah,
that's cool.
All right. That's a resume.
It's kind of I guess Derek Broaddus happened to go to high school with this person.
Oh,
so that's just
cool.
kind of cool. So that's cool. So these FBI agents did a personality profile based on the letter. And this is what they were able to gather. They were able to say that they believed that the writer of this was older, was an avid reader. There was no cussing, so they didn't feel like this person was super macho, I guess. And they could sense like a real anger behind the words. They also could see that this person had like a real anger and distaste for the wealthy. So interesting. And the FBI agents also didn't think that this person would act on it. But that's just they can't guarantee. So I understand why they didn't take that as just being it. But certain things about the letter they found to be very, like we said, we were able to notice too, very erratic, kind of manic, like there was a lot of typos in there, a lot of misspellings. And there are, like, for example, the original letter was dated Tuesday, June 4th.
Okay.
But June 4th was a Wednesday. So things like that, which aren't really a big deal, but if this person is going out of their way to date the letter and sending this ominous letter, and they're doing it incorrectly, that kind of is interesting. Maria Broaddus started to go to therapy, obviously, as you must when you're dealing with this. And her therapist told her that she was suffering PTSD from this. It was so intense and hard for her that she was truly suffering from PTSD, which is so sad. And Derek Broaddus even put out some ads for ex-military to work at their house to kind of be bodyguards.
Wow.
He was just saying, I just need you'll just work out of our backyard every day. He was looking into buying some of those German shepherds that are highly trained.
Right.
Not just like pet German shepherd, like an attack dog German shepherd. And Derek and Maria, though, they were like, what's the point? The whole point of us living here, this is supposed to be like our dream house where we're happy and everything. Like, we don't want to feel like we're living in fear and in like a military compound all the time. So they're like, we want to put the house back on the market. So they did. But unfortunately, neighborhood gossip had spread. Because even though none of this was public knowledge yet, they hadn't told their neighbors about what was happening about these letters. The neighbors knew that the Broadduses were supposed to move in.
So they're wondering why the new neighbors haven't moved.
And they aren't there. So they know that that's strange. So people are talking around town. Why have these people not moved in? Something must be going on. And also, they, I think, did the right thing. Anyone that was interested in the house, they gave them a partial disclosure about what was going on about these letters.
Right.
Anyone who put in a firm offer on the house was given copies of the letters to let them know, like, hey, this is what you're getting into.
Right, right.
And they did have a few offers, but of course, after people were given the letters, they rescinded their offer. They're like, we don't want to live here. So then the Broadduses are like, we are doing the right thing here, and we are being punished for it, basically.
Exactly.
The Woods family got a letter before we moved in, and they did not tell us about this. We're going to sue them.
Okay.
And they did. So they tried to sue them. And which is just so sad because it's just hard. I totally get why the Broadduses did that, because they're desperate and they're trying to figure out what to do. I completely understand that. But it just sucks. The Woods are also, they're kind of like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Like,
exactly.
We didn't send these letters. So they filed a lawsuit, but the lawsuit was thrown out. But because of the lawsuit, all of these letters and this information, it was now public knowledge.
Great.
And so everyone in the town knew about it. They tried to rent the house, but then no one wanted to rent the house because now everyone in the neighborhood knew the full story about what was going on. And it was, and then the whole town kind of started to panic. The mayor had a town meeting where he told everyone in the town, like, hey, don't worry about it. It's fine. The police have done an exhaustive investigation.
Oh, God.
There's nothing to worry about. You and your children are safe. But then everyone in the town is like, no fucking way.
Right.
The police did not do an exhaustive investigation because they haven't asked me or my neighbor or my friend or whatever any questions. So the police hadn't done an exhaustive investigation. They'd only asked probably the Langfords and who else. So people were upset about that. And finally, a developer came to the Broadduses and they were like, hey, we want to tear down your house and build 2 houses on your lot, which is like a thing that happens. It happened on the house I grew up, or the street I grew up actually at. Our neighbor's house was torn down and they built 2 houses. And the Broadduses are like, thank God, finally something is working out. Like this is so great. But the lot size, because they were tearing down 1 house to build 2, the lot sizes for both of those new developed houses would be 3 feet too small.
Oh, God.
So they had to bring it up with town board and everything. And so many people from this town came forward and said no, that they didn't want that to happen, that they didn't like that it would look bad on the street, that their 2 houses would be on 1 lot, and it wouldn't look right, and it would lower their property value, and they shut it down. And everyone in the town was coming forward saying things. And actually, Abby Langford, the next door neighbor, the realtor, she said at a town meeting, she said, I have spent 60 years looking out my window and seeing a beautiful house, and I don't want to see a driveway. So she's kind of like being like, yeah, I am watching the house. You know what? So like that is one thing that's weird about Peggy. It's like, Peggy, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, fuck all these people.
And also it's like, it's not your house.
Yeah.
It's so sad and bizarre. And later on, there was another house that it wasn't going through anything similar. They weren't getting any letters or anything like that. But a developer said, hey, we want to tear down your house and build 2 houses on the lot. And they would have had to make a bigger exception for them because the lot sizes were even smaller.
And they did it?
And they did it.
Okay.
The town said, that's fine.
Fuck this whole neighborhood.
Which makes you think, like, why is the town like rallying around this house?
Yeah. Why
it
the fuck is this whole town?
It seems like Stepford, you know, where there's
are they
like,
all in
some,
on this shit?
Exactly, where there's some like secret where you're like, what the fuck is going on? And this was especially hard for Maria, who she came forward and she said, like, this isn't a direct quote, but essentially she said, you know, I grew up here. I moved away, had my kids, and I brought them back here. I'm from here. I want my children to live here. I love it here. I'm from here. I am one of you, and you are saying that this house is more important than me and my children and my family.
Wow.
And like that is so terrible. And a lot of the people kind of started coming forward in the town and just hating on the Broadduses, saying that they must have been doing this for financial gain or for attention or whatever. They were upset that this was bringing bad publicity to their town, which is just so sad that they like that's what they care about and not this young family that's just like trying to figure it out. We'll go more into why it absolutely in my opinion at least, could not have been the Broadduses later when we kind of go over the suspects again. But just know that I really don't think that. So finally, some good news comes.
Okay.
And the Broadduses find renters for the house. They are a couple with grown children. They have 2 big dogs. And they knew about the letters, but they weren't really too worried about it. Derek Broaddus had installed a security system and cameras and everything like that. So this family felt okay moving in, and there was also a clause in their lease that said if something happened, they could really move out with no penalty or anything like that. So finally, something good happens for this family, like some sort of financial retribution for them.
Right.
But on February 13th, the Watcher sent another letter.
Violent winds and bitter cold, to the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria. You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me. One of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move. I walked by the news trucks when they took over my neighborhood and mocked me. I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions. 657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher. Maybe a car accident. Maybe a fire. Maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars and bicycles crash. Bones break.
Okay, I figured it out. The Watcher is Dwight Schrute. I got it now. I hear it.
That sounds like it.
Like, you're going, idiot.
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 So childish.
And also this guy, like, the Watcher is really, like, tossing everything out there. Being like, if you get a mild illness, or if a pet dies, or if something breaks down, or if something blah, blah, that's me. That's the Watcher.
Also, to the spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria. Does this fucker, like, hang out at a Renaissance fair?
Dude, I don't know. And I'm worried. I'm worried for him. But yeah, no, it's in this letter is wild. Clearly this person is, like, so, like, jacked up and, like, frustrated.
Right.
And, like, yeah, saying, a wench of a wife.
A wench.
But I do see the personality profile now. Like, this person sounds immature, but this person does seem older to me because he directed the letter to Derek and his wench of a wife. You know what I mean? Calling her a wench is just a very old thing to do. And so the people who are renting the house, God bless the renters. They stayed. They just had more, like, cameras installed and stuff, but they weren't really worried, which is good. They're very brave and good, and they were right. Nothing happened to them. They were fine. And finally, in July of 2019, the house finally sold. Someone finally bought 657 Boulevard.
Thank God.
5 years and 1 month later. They were just paying for this house and the property taxes and all that shit for 5 years.
What a nightmare.
And like Derek Broaddus, he said, you know, when he was living at his parents' house, or at Maria's parents' house, you know, he would have to wake up super early in the morning, go there, shovel that sidewalk, and then come back to his in-laws' house and then shovel their sidewalk and their driveway. It was just like a slap in the face every day. I'm sure. Like remembering that they're just like, okay, we're just paying for this house, we're paying for the mortgage and everything, and they aren't living there. It's just terrible. But thankfully, it finally sold. So now let's talk about some suspects.
Okay.
We've talked about some already, but we'll go into some more. Some people thought maybe the Watcher was someone that was jealous about the house.
Okay.
Like someone that also put in an offer on 657 Boulevard when the Woods put it up for sale.
Right.
And didn't get it. But that was pretty quickly tossed out because only 2 other offers were made. One family who made an offer, they had already bought a new house, they moved in, they seemed happy and normal and content and everything. And the other offer was actually rescinded because of some medical issues that this person or this family was going through. So they backed out on their own. It's not like they were outbid. So we can kind of toss that one out. They checked in with all of the living previous owners of the house of 657 Boulevard. And besides that one letter that the Woods got, no one said they had ever received anything, had heard anything like this, or whatever. A little history on the house. In 1913, a man named William Davies moved in there, and he actually served as the town's mayor for one term in 1932.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of interesting. He's not a suspect. It's just kind of interesting, shows you how this house has a history and it's kind of important to the town. Like,
exactly.
The mayor lived there. And so after William Davies moved out, a couple other families lived there, and then a family called the Bakes family moved in. And they lived there for about 40 years.
Oh, wow.
The parents of that family, they had since passed, but the children who are now grown, but the children who were living there said that their parents didn't tell them about any letters. They didn't hear about any letters. So,
oh, wow.
But once again, if they were young and they were getting letters, I don't know if their parents would actually tell their kids about the letters, you know? So who knows? But that seems like it's not them. But going back to the Langfords. The Langfords were the only family on the block that had been there since the 60s. So this kind of matches up with the timeline of saying my father watched in the 60s and I watch now.
Okay.
And it said that his grandfather watched in the 20s. That could mean something. Maybe they lived nearby before they moved there in the 60s. That could be something. And the person in this letter had talked a lot about the house and the layout of the house specifically, knowing where bedrooms were and the enclosed porch and things like that. So it does make you think this person had been inside the house before. So you think, oh, okay, so maybe it is one of the Langfords, the adult children, because when they were kids, maybe they had gone over to play, and so they had been in there at least a few times, so they knew what the house looked like and the layout, all of that. Really quick, before I forget, I also want to go back just to make it clear. They also checked the Woods family. They didn't really seem to be suspects. They checked the kids of the family. They did DNA testing on them. Oh, wow. It was not them. There was no real reason to think that it would be the Woodses. So I just wanted to get that out before I forgot. But back to Michael Langford. Michael Langford was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a child. And the last thing we want to do is demonize people with schizophrenia.
Of course. I've had a family member who's now passed who had schizophrenia. Just because this person had schizophrenia doesn't mean they did this.
Right. We're not saying, So just want to make that clear.
Right. Exactly.
It's just kind of something that it could align itself with this. Right. And Michael was kind of known for scaring new neighbors because he would peer through their windows when new people were moving in, just kind of looking into their windows and scaring people. And once again, everyone said this is kind of harmless. He doesn't really realize that this is crossing a boundary. But it is another thing where you're like,
well, he's still peeking in through windows. Yeah.
This is, and Michael absolutely could have gone into the house many times over the years, from going in as a kid, or did a lot of block parties and community events and things like that. So it's totally possible that he had been in there multiple times and would know how the house looked. But there's another thought that maybe it was Abby Langford. Abby Langford, kind of what I had said before about the commission and all of that stuff. And how she said she had spent 60 years looking at the house. So that does point to her. Mm-hmm. But once again, for the reasons I said, I think that's kind of a stretch. It's definitely possible. She also could have gone in there as a kid and since then. But a very, very interesting thought is that it might have been Peggy Langford, because Peggy Langford was the mother of that family. And
how old would she have been?
She's in her 90s.
That makes more because that would make sense why the police would be like, well, it's not him, but you won't get any more letters, because maybe they were like, it's probably this old. Right. She's probably a batty old gal in her 90s. They don't want to take her in. That I could see that.
Exactly. Like, she's just an old woman. Maybe she's bored. Maybe she's not thinking clearly and doesn't want anyone new to move into the neighborhood. She doesn't want things changing or anything like that. And maybe the police thought, okay, we kind of scared her out of it.
Exactly.
And the police actually did bring Michael Langford in again for another interview to check in with him, because they actually weren't totally sure either that it wasn't him.
Right.
But he cleared his second interview. I don't know exactly what they said, but technically the whole family, according to the police, has been eliminated as suspects.
Okay.
But I do think, though, that is there's something to that it could be one of them. Another person, a woman, approached a cop car that was staking out the house. And she said that her boyfriend lived down the street and that her boyfriend played a lot of really, really dark video games. And in the video game, or one of the video games, he was known as the Watcher.
That seems like a stretch.
Totally a stretch. But the police, they were kind of grasping at straws. They were desperate for anything. So the police set up 2 interviews with this person, and he didn't show up to either one. And there's really nothing they could do because all they had on him was that he plays dark video games. That's not enough to force someone in. So that kind of just died there. An interesting theory. I agree. I think it's kind of a stretch.
Yeah.
But the owner of the house behind the 657 Boulevard, that was the guy that was sitting in those lawn chairs, like, very close to the house.
Right.
He was known as being kind of weird, too. He would just walk around the neighborhood playing a flute, I guess. It's a little flautist about town.
What?
Yeah. You hate to hear it.
What? So you just walk around like the fucking Pied Piper all day, just playing a... That's okay. I mean, doesn't mean he did this, but I mean, that's just a weird goddamn tick to have.
And if there are any flautists in the house, we're here for you. Play that flute. We love it. But just if you're walking around the neighborhood, or maybe do it. I don't know. It's just... all I'm going to say is that it's weird, but live your life. But I think it's weird. But once again, that alone, not enough to say. They just were like, that's kind of weird. But that man, he had lived in his house, the house behind 657 Boulevard. He had lived there for 47 years.
Oh, wow.
And his daughter ended up growing up and marrying a man who grew up in 657 Boulevard.
Okay.
So that's just kind of interesting, kind of a weird connection with the house.
All right.
And the man, the flautist man, he said that his son even made a joke saying, like, oh, those letters sound like they could have been written by you, Dad. Like, that sounds like what you would say, or that sounds like you, which is weird.
Which is weird, but kids, maybe they meant it as a joke. It sounds like you, Dad.
Right.
Or you know what I mean? Like, that's just a weird...
Very odd. But, you know, that person, he could see the easel where the little girl was painting.
That's
he
true.
could have heard everything.
That is true.
And it had to have been someone close by. So that's interesting. But once again, there's not enough evidence or anything like that to convict them. There's also, and this doesn't really have any sort of like evidence, any hard evidence towards it. But once again, this idea that like the town is all in on it in this weird way. They're like rallying together to protect this house.
That's freaky. That's the freakiest part of it, because then it's all like, if everyone's in on it, it's like, is this like a fucking neighborhood cult or something?
Yeah. Right. So they did actually, another person down the block said that they did get one letter very similar to the Watcher, like way long ago, like I think when the Woods received their letter, but they didn't think anything of it. They just threw it away, and then they never got another letter.
Interesting. Okay.
So I don't know. So the idea that it was the Broadduses, that they did this for financial gain or for attention or whatever, I don't buy that for a second, because they lost a fuck ton of money on this deal.
Jesus.
So they bought the house for $1.3 million. They sold it 5 years later for $959,000.
Ouch.
So a huge loss.
Yeah.
A huge loss. And they had put $100,000 into the house with renovations. They also had to pay for the private investigator and the lab tests and the retired FBI agents.
Right.
I mean,
lawyers' fees.
Lawyers' fees.
Oh my God.
I mean, and then they had to pay the mortgage that whole time. They had to pay the taxes that whole time for a house they weren't living in. They clearly were doing well. They had money, but they weren't multimillionaires. They didn't have enough money where they could just have a $1.3 million house just for fun.
Right,
you know
exactly.
What I mean? And Maria and Derek Broaddus seemed to truly be really good people. They declined interviews a lot of the time. They didn't really like attention. They didn't like having stuff written about them.
Right.
They avoided that at all costs. They didn't release their children's names.
Right.
They met at the Catholic University in Fairfax, Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
Once again, not saying that just because you're Catholic means you're a good person, but it's just along with everything. They also were both known as being avid philanthropists, having raised a lot of money for children's cancer therapies.
Right.
Maria had worked at a agency for abused children when she graduated from college.
Okay.
These people seemed to walk the walk. Talk the talk, walk
exactly.
the walk. And in 2018, Netflix did win a bidding war for the rights to this story.
Very interesting.
So I don't know how much it sold for, but it was a bidding war between 5 networks and Netflix won.
Oh, wow.
So it is fair to say that they did make money on selling the rights.
You're right.
But I don't know if it would cover everything. And even if it did cover everything,
still a shit situation. It's a shitty way to get a TV show.
Why would you go through all of that to like break even or to make some money? It seems like a very long con. But something that is not ideal is that once people were kind of coming forward and speaking out against the Broadduses and saying that they didn't want them to tear the house down, to build the 2 houses.
Right.
Some of those families did get letters, very Watcher-like letter that said, not really threatening like the Watcher. They weren't outright threatening, but it still was Watcher-like letters, and they were signed Friends of the Broaddus Family. And Derek Broaddus did admit that he did that, which fucking sucks because it makes him...
God damn it. Now it's like, even if they were innocent, now you've got this fucking...
I know.
Oh, that...
And I still believe them. I don't think the Broadduses did that, but it just makes him look real bad.
It's a bad look.
Fuck. Yeah, so it sucks. And it's just so hard. Like, the kids, they said that they like had been bullied at school about this.
I'm sure.
And
That's
just,
horrible.
Like, sucks. So this story or this case has never been conclusively solved. My money is either on Peggy Langford or Michael Langford. At this point, we don't know. Excited to see this Netflix movie or documentary or series or whatever.
Whatever they do with it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that wraps it up for this episode. Once again, I'm Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And this is the Creep Street Podcast. Citizens of the Milky Way, good night and goodbye.
Bye.